Hi everyone, Dr. Nemechek here. I want to talk about type 1, type 2 diabetes. And so they're somewhat different. Type 1 is an autoimmune disorder directed at beta cells. Those are the cells that produce insulin in the pancreas. Type 2 is due to insulin resistance, which is where the cells just don't react well to insulin, and because of that you have excessive amount of sugar in the bloodstream. But the similarity between both is they're both being driven by inflammation. Okay, and what we're learning with both, and both have a genetic basis to them, both type 1 and type 2, and actually when they look closer and closer at these, type 2s at some point end up seeming to also have this autoimmune phenomena, and type 1s also seem to have a component of insulin resistance. So there's a lot of crossover here, even though the initial triggering events we believe are different, at the genetic level, but both are being triggered by chronic inflammatory stress in the body. Now, and what this inflammatory stress is, we'll talk about type 2 insulin resistance or adult onset diabetes. We know there are these genes in the DNA that have been there for at least 50,000 years in the human genome. And if these genes are left alone, you don't have diabetes. You grow up to be an old man or woman, you never have diabetes. But what has happened in the last century is through our lifestyle, our food supply, and probably some things we don't even fully understand yet, we're creating this environment in which we live in that is triggering and causing the release of inflammatory chemicals in our bloodstream without them necessarily, unnecessarily. So you should only have inflammation in the body when you need to fight an infection or repair tissue, all right? And so you sprain your ankle, you have a sinus infection, inflammation turns on and then shuts off. And when it turns on, you release these chemicals that we generally call inflammatory cytokines. Now, what's happening is people don't have an infection, they don't have an injury. When you look in their bloodstream, they have high levels of these cytokines, and there's a large number of them. I don't know, it seems like they find new ones all the time. Maybe 50 or so different cytokines. There's three of the big major ones: IL-6, interleukin 6, IL-1 beta, interleukin 1 beta, and TNF alpha. TNF stands for tumor necrosis factor alpha. Those are the main ones that are talked about, but there's a whole range of other ones. Okay, now you live in this modern world, your body is reacting to things such as maybe leakage bacteria from your gut, the excess linoleic acid, omega-6 is in the food supply triggering inflammation, microplastics, 2.5 ppm, pollutants that you breathe in that get right into your bloodstream, tobacco smoke, whole range of things. So you're exposed to this stuff, you start creating inflammation, and what happens is you have genes in your DNA, some are being turned on and some are being turned off by inflammation. Okay? And that's what starts the process. So now when these genes are turning on, now they don't all in the body just turn on at once. What they believe is happening is, and probably from genetic differences in people, some start turning on maybe in the liver first or in the muscles first or wherever in the body. And slowly, as the inflammation rises, more and more the genes in individual cells are being triggered, and those cells collectively are less and less able to take blood sugar out of the bloodstream and regulate it correctly. So you start seeing the blood sugars start rising. The higher the blood sugars rise, the more inflammation you got. Okay, and we start looking at a test called hemoglobin A1C, and this is an average of your blood sugars over 90 days, day and night, eat, no eat, exercise, no exercise. It gives you this nice average, and it's actually one of the best predictors of long-term outcome in diabetes. Well, certainly your fasting blood sugar, like in the morning, is important, especially if that can tell you if you're in dangerous range. But really the best predictor in the long term is hemoglobin A1C. So your A1C starts rising, and it's 5.6 or below is considered normal. As it starts going up, 5.7, 5.9, 6.2, up to 6.4, we consider that you are pre-diabetic. And then once you go from 6.4 above, so 6.5 and above on that A1C, now the sugar is getting, concentration is so high in the bloodstream that the sugar itself starts injuring tissue. Think of it like it starts having properties like a drain cleaner on your blood vessels. And so when you're above 6.5, you start having large blood vessel damage. And this is what leads to kind of more in the old-fashioned days than today, but still, amputation of toes, of feet, kidney failure, heart attacks, stuff like that. And so the large vessels start being damaged, okay? And so that's when you're in the diabetic range. And if that goes on continually, pretty soon, the pancreas, and by the time you get to 6.5 or above, there's so much inflammation in the pancreas that typically half of it's destroyed. Yeah, 50% of the insulin-producing capacity of your pancreas gets destroyed by the time your A1C is above 6.4. Okay? So it's not like, I'm okay. When you're below 6.4, your pancreas is starting to be destroyed. Okay? And as things get worse and worse. All right? Now, they believe the pancreas can reconstitute itself to some degree, so it's not irreversible, but it's a big deal. When you got these kind of mild, your blood sugar's up a little bit, okay, it's a big deal. All right? Your body's starting to be destroyed from that and from the inflammation that's driving that. So now here's what one of the problems is. As say back when I first started being an internal medicine doc in the 80s, diabetics, let's get these sugars down, and we're doing all sorts of insulin and drugs and whatnot to get the blood sugars down. And they found that you might prevent some of these complications, like the foot amputation, okay, by getting that blood sugar below the Drano level of 6.4 below, then the sugar's not actually ripping your blood vessels apart. And you get them down that range, but nobody was living any longer. And how do diabetics die? Heart attacks, strokes, cancer. They have a higher rate than people without diabetes. Why? It's because of the inflammation that triggers the genes, that drives the blood sugars up, is also the same thing that triggers cancer, your heart disease, and your strokes. All right? And so it's an inflammatory disease. Okay? And it's killing you with inflammation. It doesn't really kill you so much with blood sugar. Although when you're above 6.5, you got these negative effects. When you're below that, it doesn't mean you're in the clear. You got to work on that inflammation big time. Okay? And that's kind of what my protocol does. Whether we're talking about diabetes and cardiovascular disease or some neurological problem like autism, it's focused on reducing inflammation. That's all I try to do. I'm literally a one-trick pony. Okay? Lower inflammation, the body can recover. And there's growing evidence to support that. It's just there ain't much money in it, frankly. So what do? You got to balance the gut. If you're an adult, you got to use rifaximin. Inulin might, other prebiotics and probiotics, it might kind of help you digestively. They aren't going to control bacterial overgrowth or what we call SIBO enough to prevent or to allow your body to recover substantially. Okay? Now, the hard part is getting a doc to give you rifaximin. The brand name in America is Xifaxan. Then you've got these grain oils like soy, corn, safflower oil. They have linoleic acid that converts into arachidonic acid in your body, and that's one of the main molecules that can turn on inflammation in the body. So you got a huge amount of that coming in, but then you take, pork or chicken or fish, and we feed them corn and soybeans at the farm level. The linoleic acid gets converted into arachidonic acid in the meat, and the meat is inflammatory. Okay, but thank goodness the olive oil will protect you. Okay, this is why the French and the Italians seem so much healthier to us, and we've been studying this Mediterranean diet, even though they smoked a lot more than Americans, they ate a lot more cholesterol than Americans. They had a fraction of the heart disease. It's because the heart disease was from inflammation, okay, in large part due to the vegetable oils and their accidental, just kind of accidental use of olive oil as a topper for their food blocks that. Not only blocks it, can reverse it. It's a powerful effect in some of the animal studies. So that's where the olive oil comes in. And we don't have enough omega-3s. I said omega-6s are these molecules, linoleic acid and arachidonic acid. They're the molecules that turn on inflammation. And we're getting about 20 times the amount that we should of that. So it's like we're eating kerosene. We don't have enough omega-3s, and omega-3s are the molecules that turn off inflammation. So that's where you need more of that. And I recommend a very high DHA concentration of omega-3. So omega-3s are EPA and DHA in fish oil. Most have a lot of EPA and a little bit of DHA. DHA is the only part that gets in the brain. Okay, so I want the other way. So per capsule, you get more oomph up in the brain. Makes a big difference. Okay, you want a DHA concentrated fish oil, and that's what our Nemechek silver brands are. And so, with diabetes, again, getting back to inflammation, so I put people on fish oil and olive oil. We get their gut balanced. Use of a vagus nerve stimulator, by a little bit of that every day, lowers inflammation in the body. And then another major source in diabetics is a thing called AGE, like age, the word. And it means advanced glycation end products. And these are molecules from protein and sugar, which are very healthy if you don't cook them, but once you start cooking them at high temperatures and dry temperatures, okay, these will fuse, become these inflammatory molecules that are highly, highly inflammatory. So there's, at least a dozen studies I'm aware of where you take diabetics and you say, because most diabetes studies are eat less or eat these different foods, or we're going to see what happens to your blood sugar. Really, the biggest impact you see is don't change what you eat. And they would send out these dietitians and cooking specialists, and they would train people to just cook the same amount, the same type, and the same amount of food at a lower temperature. And when you did, you make less of these AGEs, so you have less of this inflammatory stuff in your diet. And what happens? The blood sugars actually come down rather an impressive amount, just by cooking your food at low and slow kind of temperatures, moist, so more steaming, okay, more crock pot than, say, the air dryer. That'd be horrible, actually. That'll really rack up your AGEs. So there's a variety of things you can do there. Again, reduction of body fat. If you're able to attain that, body fat makes a lot of inflammation. That's why the blood sugars come down. It's less body fat, less inflammation. All right? So diabetes isn't just about blood sugar. Diabetes is primarily about inflammation in terms of how well you feel, how long you live, how healthy you are. Okay? So I hope that's helpful to everybody. Y'all have a great day. Take care.